Where were you?
Where were you?
Where were you?
Where were you?
I was in my Miss Quick's 4th grade class, homeroom when I heard about the news.
I was in 5th grade at King in Miss Cox's class.
On September 11th, I was homesick, and my mom woke me up and took me to my great uncle's house. I laid on his couch while he turned on the news, and we watched the attacks. And he kept explaining how important in history this was going to be, and how this date would always be remembered. And I remember him videotaping it, and just the emotions on his face were just shocking to me because I'd never seen such a strong man be hurt so much. So that's where I was on September 11th.
I was in the 5th grade. I believe I was in science class, and I remember my teacher getting lots of messages on her room phone. And after a while, our principal came on the intercom and told all teachers to turn on their television so we could watch the news. I really didn't understand what was going on at that time.
September 11th, when I heard the news on the TV, I was fixing to leave out. And it came across the television, and I was so frightened over thinking about it, and didn't know how far that might reach out and what all. And I thought about all the people that was there working there, and a lot of little children that were in the place at that time too. It was just a sad thing for our country, and I still think about it a lot each day.
I had dropped you and your brother off at school, and we still lived in West Columbia, so I had about a 45-minute drive to get back home. So I was in the car on the way home, and I heard about the first plane, and they really didn't know what had happened at that time, so I just kept driving, and I was, just listening to it, and then they started talking about thinking it was a terrorist attack and that kind of thing, and talking about another plane and all this kind of stuff, and I didn't know what to do, and I wanted to turn around and go and get y'all from school. It was only like 8:30 in the morning, and so I didn't know what to do. I kept listening to the radio, and they were saying, don't go get your kids out of school, don't do anything different, just keep doing what you're doing. And said they would let people know more details, but it was really hard to go home and wait to hear stuff. I really wanted y'all to get out of school. So I got home and called your grandmother, and we sat on the phone, and we ended up starting crying because both of us wanted to get y'all out of school. So anyway, I don't think I'll ever forget that day.
Well, being 9 years old, you're kind of shocked something like that could happen, and it's hard to imagine something like that happening, an attack on your country, and you kind of think the U.S. is a very powerful nation and nothing like that could ever happen. It's just, a lot of emotional, you can't describe it.
I was kind of shocked and upset, but I was only 10 years old, so I wasn't really sure what to think about the news.
My biggest emotion on September 11th was kind of confusion. I didn't really understand what was going on and what it meant that terrorists would attack our country and kill innocent lives. And being as a 5th grader, I think I was kind of numb to the fact of many people dying in a way like that. And I think that my parents and the people around me were so upset. It was kind of confusing not to understand the sadness that was going around. So I definitely say I was just very confused.
My emotions at first were very unclear until I got home and my mom explained it to me a little bit more, and she just told me really like what those buildings stood for and what all went on in those buildings and exactly what terrorism was, because before that I really had no clue.
I was upset and scared. I was worried that something else was going to happen. I was worried that it might be the start of a war. I really didn't know what to do. I had all kinds of emotions going on. I was mostly just scared, and I was sad for those people, but I was also worried that something was going to happen here. I really didn't know. I was really upset though, I remember that.
Yeah, I was especially worried about my dad because he works in one of those, like a chemical plant and stuff, and all these attacks were happening all over and stuff. I was kind of worried about him. Maybe an airplane with something might crash into one of those places, but thank God nothing happened. But yeah, I was worried about my family.
Yes, I was. I was worried about my brother because he's 2 years younger than me and he was in 3rd grade. And I was also really worried about my mom because we lived like an hour away from our school. And I just wanted to make sure my whole family was okay.
I was very, like I said earlier, confused. So I think the biggest thing I was worried about was like how my parents were taking it and how my brother was taking it and where my grandparents were and if I knew anybody that could be in danger. So I think my biggest question about emotions then also was, you know, what was going to happen next? Like, was the attack going to be on our hometown or my family, or would it be somebody I knew next time? So I was quite worried.
I was worried about my family and everybody else's family because with all that I didn't know what was coming next. Could have been some atomic bombs thrown out. They would have drifted a long ways and killed a lot more people.
Yes, very much so. I was especially worried about you and your brother since y'all were at school. But I was worried about everybody. I was trying to think of relatives and where they lived and trying to get in touch with everybody, and I was worried about the people I work with. I called them and I was trying to think if I knew anybody there in New York or anybody visiting there or anything like that. But I was worried about everybody. I was worried about everything because I was afraid it might be the start of a war.
I mean, words can't describe like what happened that day. I mean, all you can do is look at the textbooks or videos and show it and talk about it. I mean, it's a real emotional thing as an American to talk about. But I mean, I guess you do the best you can to explain it. And it's a tough thing to do.
I'll probably have to show them in books or either use the internet for videos or something like that because it'll be hard for me to explain all that in my own words.
It's kind of confusing to think about explaining this to my future children one day or my students. I think it's a memory that's going to be kind of hard to tackle when you're explaining to a student or a child what exactly happened on that day. I think my biggest thing would be going through an approach of talking about how it distraughted many people and it hurt many people, but it also, our country stood up and patriotism was at its prime then, and how people came together and learned to support each other. And so when I explain it to my children one day, I want them to understand that we are a part of the United States of America and that we went through a terrorist attack, but we also came together and got through it.
When I become a mom or a teacher, I probably would just it would be really different explaining this to children who have never lived during this period. And I guess I would probably show them lots of videos and lots of pictures and just tell them how my mom explained it to me, my parents, just really let me know what those buildings really stood for and exactly what terrorism was and how it affects our country.
I kind of had a hard time with that because y'all were really young. Kenny was in the 3rd grade and you were in the 5th grade. I knew you would kind of understand a little more than him. He was only about 9. But it's still hard even though you were 10 or 11. I know it's hard for kids to understand. They don't know why somebody would do that because adults don't know why that someone would do that. And it's hard to make children understand, try to make them feel safe. Because when you don't really believe it yourself, when you don't believe that they're safe, I think that children can see through it. So I tried the best I could to explain that they, there was a group of people that hated Americans and that's why they tried to kill us, but I tried to explain to them that nothing was going to happen to them. But I know a lot of kids were really afraid that something was going to happen to them because, if it could happen in New York, they figure it could happen where they live.
Well, we were going through an awful war at that time when Pearl Harbor was struck, and I had a brother that was fighting over there, but he was not at Pearl Harbor at the time. But we were really frightened and worried about all of them too.